Ethan moved quietly across the empty school auditorium, pushing his old cleaning cart the same way he pushed it every day. Slow and careful, never wanting to disturb anyone. He had been a janitor for almost 4 years now, long enough that most students and teachers barely noticed him anymore. He was the man who swept floors, emptied trash, and cleaned spilled juice after lunch. No one asked where he came from or what he used to be. They only saw a tired single father trying to earn a living. The wooden stage in front of him looked dusty again, even though he cleaned it yesterday. The school was preparing for the annual talent show, so everything needed to look perfect. Ethan set the mop aside and climbed gently onto the stage. His joints cracked a little, reminding him of long hours and little rest. He bent to wipe the floor, moving with quiet focus. His hands were rough from years of scrubbing, but every movement showed a kind of gentleness too, a softness that didn't match his hard life. Near the edge of the stage sat an old piano. Its black paint was scratched, and some keys were chipped as Ethan cleaned around it. His eyes kept drifting to the instrument. He tried not to look, but he always ended up staring for a moment too long. It wasn't just a piano to him, it was a memory, a dream, and a wound all at the same time, but he turned away quickly. He had no time for old dreams. Dreams didn't pay rent or buy milk for his daughter. Lily, his 6-year-old girl, was the reason he kept going. Every morning she hugged him before school, telling him he was the best dad in the world. She didn't see the tired lines on his face or the pain in his back. She only saw her hero, but Ethan didn't feel like a hero. Not when he could barely afford groceries some weeks. Still, he worked as hard as he could, because Lily depended on him for everything. As he wiped dust off a chair, a soft sound echoed inside the empty room. It was the wind rattling the windows, but for a moment, Ethan thought it was music. His heart jumped in his chest, memories flashed in his mind, like someone opening an old box he had buried long ago. He saw flashes of himself as a young man sitting at a shining grand piano, his hands moving with effortless grace. His father stood behind him back then, proud and smiling. His music teacher predicted a bright future. But that was a long time ago, before life changed everything. Ethan shook the thoughts away and continued cleaning. A teacher passed the doorway and nodded at him politely before walking off again. That was normal. People were kind enough but never curious. They didn't know the truth behind those tired eyes. They didn't know that the man wiping floors once dreamed of performing in concert halls. They didn't know he once wrote music late into the night. They didn't know he gave it all up when tragedy arrived at his door. And Ethan preferred it that way. He didn't want pity. He didn't want questions he couldn't answer. He just wanted to get through the day. As he dusted the top of the piano, his fingers brushed a key by accident. A soft note rang out, clear and pure in the silent hall. Ethan froze, his breath caught in his throat. For a second he stood completely still. Like the building itself had stopped breathing, the single note echoed and faded. Leaving a strange ache in his chest, he pulled his hand back quickly, almost like he was afraid the piano might pull him in. He whispered to himself, "Not today," and kept cleaning. But his heart didn't listen. It was beating faster, reminding him of things he had tried to forget. He took one last look at the piano, then forced himself to look away. He was just here to clean, that was all. The school talent show was tomorrow. And there was still so much work to do. Chairs needed arranging. Floors needed polishing. Stages needed fixing. And Ethan would do it all quietly and without complaint. Because that was his life now, still. As he pushed his cleaning cart toward the next row of seats, he didn't notice the music teacher standing behind the doorway. Watching him, she had seen the way he touched the piano. The hesitation, the familiarity. The strange mixture of longing and fear in his eyes. For the first time, someone wondered who Ethan really was, not as a janitor, but as a man with a story hidden behind silence. And that small moment, unnoticed by him, would become the first step toward changing everything he believed about himself, everything he thought he had lost, and everything the world assumed about the man no one noticed. Lily sat on the couch swinging her short legs while waiting for her father to return from his shift. She always stayed awake for him. No matter how late he came home, the moment the door opened, she jumped up and ran to him, her tiny arms wrapped around his waist before he could even take off his shoes. Ethan lifted her gently, even though his body was tired. Her smile made everything worth it. He placed her on the table as he heated leftover soup for himself. Lily watched him closely, just like she always did. Her eyes followed every move he made, as if she was studying him. Ethan noticed but didn't ask why. She was a curious child, full of questions, full of ideas bigger than her small body. After dinner, Lily grabbed her drawing notebook and climbed onto the couch beside him. She flipped to a page where she had drawn a stick figure playing a piano. Another small figure stood beside it, with hearts floating above their heads. Ethan laughed softly and asked, "Is that us?" Lily nodded with the excitement of someone revealing a secret treasure. "You used to play piano," she said suddenly, not as a question but as a fact. Ethan froze for a moment. His heart tightened. He wasn't ready to talk about it. He had locked those memories away years ago. But Lily was the only one who could open any door inside him. Still, he took a deep breath and answered carefully, "Yes, I used to." She leaned closer, her eyes shining. "Why don't you play now?" Ethan looked away, trying to hide the sadness in his face. How could he explain everything to a 6-year-old? How could he tell her about the accident, the loss, the fear of trying again? He just shook his head and said, "Life changed, sweetheart." But Lily didn't accept that, not because she was stubborn, but because she saw more in her father than he ever saw in himself. She watched him work 2 jobs, watched him wake up early, watched him fix her hair, pack her lunch, and kiss her forehead each morning. She believed he could do anything. So she believed he could still play, maybe even better than before. That night, before bed, she whispered to her stuffed rabbit, "Daddy is a piano hero, he just forgot." She made a small plan in her head. Too small for grown-ups to notice, but big enough for fate to listen. The next day at school, Lily walked into her classroom holding her father's old music book. She had secretly taken it from the top shelf where Ethan kept things he never touched. The teacher, Ms. Harper, noticed the old book and smiled. "Do you like music, Lily?" Lily shook her head. "It's not mine, it's Daddy's." Ms. Harper raised an eyebrow. "Your dad plays?" Lily nodded proudly. "Better than anyone, but he doesn't show anyone." "I want him to play again." Her voice cracked just a little, like she was holding back something heavy and important. Ms. Harper knelt beside her and asked gently, "Does he miss it?" Lily shrugged. "His heart does, I think. But his head says no." Something in those words touched the teacher. She had seen many parents at the school, but none carried themselves like Ethan. He walked quietly, almost trying to disappear. Yet there was something about him, a softness, a depth, like someone who held a whole world inside and was afraid to let it out. Ms. Harper decided to pay more attention from now on. Later, during lunch, Lily saw the school principal walking by, and she stopped him with bold confidence only little children have. She tugged the sleeve of his coat and said, "Sir, my daddy can play piano for the show." The principal blinked at her, confused. "Your father? The janitor?" Lily nodded very hard. "Yes, he's super good." The principal smiled politely but didn't take her seriously. "We already have a pianist, sweetheart." Lily frowned. "But Daddy is better." The principal just patted her head before walking away. Adults often underestimate the truth spoken by a child. They don't realize how clearly children see hidden pain and hidden talent. After school, Ethan came to pick her up. But he was surprised when Ms. Harper approached him. She told him gently, "Your daughter says you're a remarkable pianist." Ethan's face turned red immediately. embarrassment mixing with old hurt. "Oh, she exaggerates," he said quickly. It was a long time ago. Ms. Harper noticed how fast he changed the subject, like the conversation itself was painful. She didn't push further but made a mental note. This man is hiding something extraordinary. On the way home, Lily looked out the window silently. Thinking, planning, hoping, she wasn't giving up. She had put the first idea into the world, and she believed it would grow into something big. Something that would help her father remember who he truly was. That night, before sleeping, she whispered again to her stuffed rabbit, "Tomorrow will be different." And somehow, she felt it in her tiny heart. She was right. The world was already moving toward something neither she nor her father could imagine. The school auditorium buzzed with excitement as students prepared for the talent show. Kids ran back and forth carrying costumes, teachers hung decorations, and the sound team checked speakers that crackled every few minutes. It was a noisy, colorful chaos. And in the middle of it all, Ethan worked silently, sweeping the corners and setting up chairs. His job was simple: make everything look perfect before the parents arrived that evening. But the universe had quietly planned something else. Earlier that morning, the school pianist had sent a message saying he was extremely sick. He couldn't come. No backup pianist was available on such short notice. Panic spread among the teachers like a small fire. The principal walked around with a hand on his forehead, muttering, "We need someone. We need someone fast." Ms. Harper remembered Lily's words. Her heart tugged her toward the idea, but her mind hesitated. Could a man who spent years avoiding the piano suddenly help? And more importantly, would he even agree? She looked toward the stage, where Ethan cleaned the last row of chairs quietly, unaware that fate was waiting behind him. Meanwhile, Lily sat with her classmates in the first row. Swinging her feet nervously, she knew something was wrong. She heard teachers whispering, "Who will play the opening music?" "And we can't start without the piano." Lily pressed her lips together, her tiny hands tightening around her stuffed rabbit that she secretly brought in her backpack. She whispered into its ear, "This is Daddy's moment, finally." The principal gathered the staff and said, "We need someone to test the microphone and the piano volume. Anyone with basic music sense will do." Before any teacher could volunteer, Lily jumped up from her seat and shouted in her small, proud voice, "My daddy can do it." Everyone turned toward her, surprised. A few parents chuckled softly, thinking it was just a child being dramatic. The principal blinked. "Sweetheart, we need an actual pianist," Lily replied with absolute confidence. "He is one." Ms. Harper stepped forward and said gently, "Maybe." "We let him try, just to test the sound." The principal hesitated, but they had no other option. He finally nodded. "Fine. Call him." Lily ran to the side of the stage, her little heart beating fast. "Daddy," she whispered loudly. Ethan turned, confused. "Lily? What are you doing here? You're supposed to sit with your class." She grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the piano. Ignoring his confusion, "They need you to test the sound," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. Ethan froze the moment he understood. His stomach tightened, his heartbeat stumbled. "Lily?" "No," he whispered. "I can't." But she looked up at him with those big, hopeful eyes. "You can," she said softly. "I know you can. Just once, Daddy. Just try." He swallowed hard, trapped between fear and love. He didn't want to embarrass himself. Not in front of so many people, not after so many years. Not with hands that had grown rusty and a heart weighed down by old pain. But he also couldn't say no to Lily, not when she believed in him more than he believed in himself. The principal approached with a polite but uncertain smile. "Mr. Ethan, we just need someone to check if the microphones and piano volume are okay. Just a few notes." Ethan nodded slowly, even though every muscle in his body wanted to turn around and run. He stepped toward the piano like a man walking toward something dangerous. Something sacred, something that held pieces of his past. The piano bench creaked softly when he sat down. His hands hovered above the keys. Trembling, he took a quiet breath, feeling his throat tighten. The auditorium grew strangely silent, as if everyone sensed something unexpected was about to happen. He pressed one key. The note rang out clear, soft, familiar. It felt like touching a memory with his fingertips. Then he pressed another and another. The sound curled through the air gently. Waking something inside him he thought he had buried forever. The sound team adjusted the microphone slowly, staring at him. Ms. Harper covered her mouth without realizing it. Lily stood at the edge of the stage, her smile trembling with excitement. The principal blinked twice, wondering why a simple sound check suddenly felt like a beginning of something bigger. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. His fingers shook. But not from fear anymore, from recognition. His hands remembered the distance between keys, the weight of touch, the timing of breath. It was like meeting an old friend he thought he had lost forever. Then, without planning, without thinking, he let his fingers drift into a small melody he once wrote long ago. A melody he created for someone he had loved deeply. Someone he lost the moment the notes left the piano. The air in the room changed. Conversations faded. Footsteps paused. Even the decorations stopped swaying. The music wrapped around everyone, pulling them into silence. No one expected it, not the teachers, not the principal. Not even Ethan himself, but Lily knew. Her eyes sparkled with tears as she whispered softly, "I told you, the sound test had turned into something else, something fragile, powerful, and impossible to ignore." And Ethan, the janitor everyone saw but no one truly noticed, had just taken his first step back into the world he once belonged to. Ethan didn't understand how it happened. One moment he was pressing a few keys for a simple sound test, and the next moment, his hands were moving with a life of their own. The melody flowed out of him like water breaking through a dam. It wasn't loud or showy, but it was full of something the room hadn't heard in years, real feeling, real memory, real pain. He kept his eyes half closed, afraid that if he looked up, the spell would break. His fingers danced slowly across the chipped keys, touching each one with a gentle precision that didn't match the old, damaged piano. Every note seemed to soften the air, smooth the noise, and pull even the smallest heartbeat toward it. A few students peeked in from the hallway, confused by the sudden silence. A teacher carrying costumes stopped walking, her hands hanging in the air. The custodian from the corridor dropped his broom and whispered, "Is that Ethan?" He wasn't sure, because the man playing looked nothing like the quiet janitor he swept floors with. This man looked alive. Ethan's fingers hesitated once, trembling as they reached for a note that carried the heaviest memory. He almost skipped it, almost let the melody fall apart. But something inside him refused to stay buried. He pressed the key anyway, and a soft, aching sound filled the room. It felt like his heart had opened, just a little. After years of staying locked shut, he saw in his mind the face of the woman he wrote the melody for, her laugh, her smile, the way she used to sit beside him while he played. He saw the hospital room, the empty chair, the silence that followed when she was gone. He felt his chest tighten, but the music kept him steady. The piano became the only place where pain didn't crush him, but transformed into something beautiful. Lily stood at the very edge of the stage, her small hands clasped, afraid to breathe too loudly. She had never seen her father like this, not tired, not worried, not rushing, but shining, truly shining. Like someone touched by light, she whispered softly, "That's my daddy," as if saying it too loudly might break the magic. The principal stared with his mouth slightly open, completely forgetting the stress of the missing pianist. He looked at Ms. Harper, who looked back with wide eyes. Both understood without needing words. This was no ordinary janitor. This was someone extraordinary hiding behind an ordinary life. As Ethan played, parents waiting in the entrance hallway heard the music and drifted toward the doors. Drawn like magnets, they held their coats, frozen in place, listening. Even children who normally laughed and talked nonstop stood quietly, feeling something they didn't know how to name. A little girl whispered to her friend, "Who is that?" Her friend shrugged. "I think he cleans the cafeteria." But their eyes didn't look away, because even children knew when they were hearing something rare. Ethan's hands slowed, the melody reaching its end. His fingers lingered on the final note, letting it fade into the stillness. For a moment, he didn't move, didn't look up, didn't breathe. He felt like he had stepped out of time, like the world had paused to listen to a part of him he thought had died long ago. When he finally opened his eyes, he expected to see an empty room again. He thought he would simply return to sweeping floors, that his brief moment of vulnerability would disappear unnoticed, but instead, he saw faces, rows of faces, staring back at him with stunned silence. Teachers, parents, students. Even staff from other sections of the building had gathered without him realizing. Their eyes were wide, some shining with tears, some filled with disbelief, some simply full of awe. Ethan's heart stumbled. I was just testing the sound," he said softly, almost apologizing. His voice cracked a little. His cheeks grew warm with embarrassment. He wanted to stand up and run off the stage, but his legs felt frozen. Then Lily broke the silence. Her tiny voice echoed softly, "Daddy." That was beautiful. A few people gasped, some smiled, and others finally blinked after standing still too long. The spell broke gently, like morning light spreading into a dark room. Ms. Harper stepped forward first, clapping slowly, then faster. Her eyes were wet. The principal joined, and then the entire room erupted into applause, loud, long, overwhelming. Ethan felt the sound crash into him like a wave. He wasn't ready for it. He wasn't used to being seen. Truly seen. He lowered his head, humble and shy. His shoulders shook with the emotion he could no longer hide. For years, he had lived like a shadow, unnoticed and unimportant, but in this moment, under those bright stage lights, with Lily smiling up at him like he had just lifted the world, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt alive again. Ethan sat frozen on the piano bench as the applause swelled around him. It felt unreal, like he had stepped into someone else's life. People clapped, some even stood, and a few students whispered to one another with wide, shining eyes, but Ethan didn't know what to do. He had never expected anyone to hear him play again, let alone react like this. His hands shook slightly. Still resting above the keys, he pulled them back slowly, almost afraid the piano might call him again. He stood up awkwardly, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry," he said under his breath. Though he wasn't sure why he apologized, maybe because he felt exposed. Maybe because he didn't think he deserved this attention. Maybe because showing a piece of his heart so openly terrified him. But Lily didn't let him stay small. She climbed onto the stage steps and wrapped her arms around his waist tightly. He looked down, and her little face was filled with pride and joy. "Daddy, you played like magic," she whispered. Her words broke something open inside him. Something he had locked away for so long, it almost hurt to feel it again. More teachers gathered near the stage. Ms. Harper approached first, her voice soft with awe. "Ethan." "That wasn't sound testing." He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "It just came out," he muttered, embarrassed, but she shook her head gently. "No, it came from somewhere deep, something beautiful." The principal stepped forward next, adjusting his glasses as if that would help him process what he'd just witnessed. "Mr. Ethan," he said with a mixture of surprise and respect, "where did you learn to play like that?" Ethan hesitated, his eyes drifting to the floor. "A long time ago," he replied. "It doesn't matter anymore. But the principal disagreed silently. He had seen enough talent in his career to know this man wasn't just good, he was remarkable. Meanwhile, the students who had peeked in from the hallway ran to tell others. In minutes, more people gathered outside the auditorium doors. Whispering, "Did you hear? The janitor plays like a professional." "No way," another student said, but it sounded like a movie soundtrack. The buzz spread through the school quickly, like someone had set off a small spark that lit up every corner. Still, Ethan tried to step off the stage, wanting to escape the eyes, the questions, the attention, but before he could move, another group of parents entered, drawn by the lingering echo of the melody. One mother asked, "Who played just now?" A teacher pointed gently, "Him." The mother's eyebrows shot up. "The janitor?" She didn't say it in a rude way, only shocked, deeply shocked. Because the music she heard was something she had assumed came from a recording. Parents approached carefully, respectfully. "Sir." "That was beautiful," one said. "Do you teach?" Ethan shook his head so fast it almost looked like fear. No, I just clean." But another parent stepped forward. "Not today, you didn't." The room softened after that. The applause faded, replaced by a warm buzz of admiration. Lily held her father's hand tightly and tugged him closer to the crowd. She looked up at each person proudly, silently telling them, "See? I told you." But amidst the praise, something else happened, something deeper, something internal. Ethan felt a strange pull inside his chest, a mix of vulnerability and power. For years, he had hidden the part of himself that loved music, the part that hurt when he walked away from it, the part he convinced himself no longer mattered. But hearing people react like this, seeing Lily's shining eyes, feeling the energy of the room, it woke something in him he thought had died. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine what life could have been, what life still could be, if he had the courage to try again. If he wasn't afraid of failing. If he wasn't afraid of remembering the past that music always brought back. He closed his eyes briefly. And the image returned, the woman he loved sitting beside him while he played. The way she laughed, the way she held his hand, the way she believed in him more than he believed in himself. Losing her had taken music away from him. Without her, the piano felt like a wound, not a gift. That was why he stopped. That was why he never played again, but today felt different. Today, music didn't hurt. It healed, even if only a little. The principal cleared his throat and spoke again. "Mr. Ethan, would you consider helping us open the talent show tonight?" Ethan's heart jumped painfully. "No, I'm not ready," he whispered. Almost everyone in the room fell quiet, waiting for his decision. Lily squeezed his hand, her eyes begging silently. "Daddy, please." Ethan looked at the piano, then at his daughter, then at the people who had seen him in a way no one had in years. The room seemed to hold its breath. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no either. And that small hesitation, that tiny moment of uncertainty, felt like a door opening in his life. A door he thought was sealed forever. Tonight would come, and with it, a choice he never expected to face again. The news of Ethan's unexpected performance spread through the entire school by the afternoon. Everywhere he walked, he heard whispers, not the kind that hurt, but the kind filled with curiosity and surprise. Students peeked around corners to watch him pass. Teachers exchanged looks that said, "We never knew." Even the principal, who usually walked with stiff seriousness, looked strangely softer whenever his eyes met Ethan's, but no one felt as much excitement as Lily. She walked beside her father, swinging his hand with every step. Her smile refused to fade. Every few minutes, she tugged his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, they loved you." Ethan smiled weakly each time, but inside, he felt a storm rising. Fear, hope, confusion, memories, all swirling together. He returned to the janitor's closet to finish his work. But for the first time ever, he couldn't focus. He kept replaying the melody he had played, the faces watching him, the applause. The voices telling him he was special. It felt unreal. It felt impossible. It felt dangerous, because hope was dangerous. Hope had hurt him before. When the final bell rang, students rushed out, eager for the evening talent show. Decorations sparkled under the lights. Posters lined the hallways. The school buzzed like a beehive. Ethan stayed behind to clean the auditorium before the show. It was his job, after all. Fame or no fame. He still had duties. He picked up wrappers, straightened chairs, fixed a torn curtain, but his mind was far away. He kept glancing at the piano on the stage, the same old piano with chipped keys and worn paint. Somehow it looked different now, like it was waiting for him. Like it recognized him, like it had whispered his name after years of silence. He hated how much that scared him as he stood staring. Ms. Harper walked in quietly. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded too quickly. "Just working." She stepped closer. "Ethan, the principal is serious about you opening the show tonight." He froze, staring at the floor. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm not a performer, not anymore." Miss Harper studied him carefully. "I don't think performing is the problem," she said gently. "I think you're afraid of feeling something again." Ethan's breath hitched. She was right, and that terrified him even more. He turned away sharply and grabbed a broom. "I just need to finish this," he said, but Miss Harper didn't leave. "Lily believes in you," she said softly. "Maybe it's time you believe in yourself too." Then she walked away, leaving Ethan alone with the broom and his thoughts. As evening approached, parents and families filled the auditorium. Children in costumes rushed backstage. The excitement grew louder and brighter with each passing minute. Ethan stayed near the entrance with his cart, hoping no one would ask him anything. But then the principal approached him again. "Mr. Ethan," he began kindly, "I know you're unsure, but the kids would be honored if you opened the show." Ethan swallowed hard. "I don't want to take someone's place." The principal smiled gently. "You're not taking someone's place. You're stepping into your own." Those words landed deep, heavier than Ethan expected. Before he could respond, Lily ran toward him, wearing her tiny school performance outfit, glittery shoes, and a headband that sparkled under the lights. She jumped into his arms, her voice full of hope. "Daddy, you'll play, right?" Her eyes were too pure, too honest, too full of admiration. Ethan felt something crack inside him. Something small but important. He knelt down to her height, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sweetheart," he whispered, "what if I mess up? What if I'm not good anymore?" Lily shook her head fiercely. "You're the best, Daddy." "I know it." He looked into her eyes, the same eyes that trusted him when he felt worthless, the same eyes that made him wake up every morning, the same eyes that believed in him when he couldn't believe in himself. And in that moment, Ethan realized something. Maybe tonight wasn't about being perfect. Maybe tonight wasn't about impressing parents or teachers. Maybe tonight wasn't about reclaiming some old dream. Maybe tonight was about showing his daughter that he was brave too. He took a deep breath, the kind that shakes the chest and steadies the heart. He stood up slowly and looked toward the stage. "Okay," he whispered, barely louder than the hum of the crowd. "I'll try," Lily gasped. Her face exploding with joy, she hugged him tightly. "You're going to make the whole world clap again," she said. Then she ran backstage to join her class, leaving Ethan alone at the foot of the stage. He walked toward the piano, each step heavy, each breath trembling. The lights were warm on his skin, the room buzzing behind him. He touched the piano gently. Like greeting an old friend he feared, he had failed. He sat down slowly, the bench creaking under him. He closed his eyes, feeling his heart beat fast, but this time, not from fear, from something new, this time from courage. The audience was still settling in when Ethan adjusted the piano bench. His palms were sweating, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He could hear children laughing behind the curtains, the crackling of the speakers, the shuffling of programs in the audience's hands. Everything felt louder than usual, or maybe it was his fear making the world sharper. He stared at the keys for a long moment, his fingers hovered above them. Trembling, the lights felt hot on his face. And for a second he wanted to run. He wanted to stand up, walk off the stage, go back to the safety of sweeping, mopping, and being invisible. That was the life he knew. That was the life that never judged him. But then he saw Lily from the side of the stage. Peeking through the curtains, her eyes glowed with pride. Not pressure, just pure love and trust. She wasn't asking for perfection. She wasn't asking for magic, she was asking for courage. And he knew he couldn't walk away from that. Ethan closed his eyes and took a slow breath. He let the noise fade. He let the world soften. He let himself remember, not the pain, not the loss, but the love that used to live inside the music, the love that once made him feel whole. And for the first time in years, the thought didn't break him. It lifted him. He placed his hands on the keys. And the moment he pressed the first note, the entire auditorium fell silent. The sound was soft, warm, like a whisper of something old coming back to life. Ethan felt the vibration under his fingertips, and something deep inside him exhaled. He moved to the next chord, then the next. Each note carried a piece of him, the parts he hid, the parts he feared, the parts he thought he lost. The melody flowed, smooth and tender. It wasn't the complex, polished music he once played in competitions. It was something simpler, more honest, born from years of silence, born from the quiet strength he built while raising his daughter alone, born from grief that had softened into memory. People in the audience leaned forward without realizing it. A father lowered his phone, forgetting to record. A mother held her child a little closer. A student stopped fidgeting and stared, confused by why a grown-up could sound so emotional. A group of parents exchanged glances, whispering, "Where did he come from?" But Ethan didn't see any of it. He was in a world of his own. A world made of notes and breath and memory, for the first time. The music didn't trap him inside sadness, it carried him out of it. His fingers moved smoother with each measure. His shoulders relaxed, his heartbeat slowed into the rhythm. His soul felt something he hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Halfway through the melody, his mind drifted to her, the woman he loved. The woman who used to sit beside him while he practiced. The woman who used to say, "Play like you're speaking to someone's heart." He felt a tear slip down his cheek, but he didn't stop. He let it fall. Let it become part of the song, part of the healing. When the piece shifted into a brighter part, Ethan opened his eyes just a little, and his breath nearly left him. Because the entire auditorium was watching him, not with curiosity, not with surprise, but with something else, something like respect, admiration, gratitude. He had never seen that directed at him before. And then he saw Lily, no longer peeking but standing proudly at the edge of the stage. Tears shining in her eyes, she mouthed the words, "I love you, Daddy." And that single moment gave Ethan more strength than any applause ever could. He moved into the final notes, letting them fade gently into the stillness. The sound lingered in the air, soft and glowing, and then silence, a deep, breathtaking silence that filled every corner of the room. For a second, no one moved, no one breathed, no one spoke. Then, like a wave breaking, the audience erupted. Applause exploded through the hall. People stood up, cheering, shouting, clapping. Some had tears on their cheeks, some covered their mouths. Some just shook their heads in disbelief. Ethan sat there stunned, overwhelmed. His chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something warm and powerful, something he hadn't felt in years, pride. Not the proud kind that shouts, but the kind that whispers, You did it. The principal rushed toward the stage, shaking Ethan's hand firmly. That, he said breathlessly, was extraordinary. Teachers surrounded him, praising him, thanking him. Parents asked if he gave lessons. Some asked for his name, his background, his story. But Ethan could barely hear them. His eyes were locked on Lily. She ran to him, almost tripping over her sparkly shoes, and threw herself into his arms. He held her tightly, lifting her off the ground as she laughed and cried at the same time. I knew you could do it, she said, her little voice trembling with emotion. Ethan kissed the top of her head, whispering, "Thank you for believing in me." And as he held her, with the applause echoing around them, he realized something powerful. Tonight wasn't just a performance. Tonight was the moment he stepped out of the shadows. Tonight was the moment he reclaimed the part of himself he thought he had buried forever. Tonight was the moment he became not just a janitor, but a musician again. After the applause faded and the next performers prepared backstage, Ethan stepped off the stage with Lily still holding tightly to his hand. His legs felt weak, not from fear anymore, but from the weight of everything that had just happened. The hallway outside the auditorium buzzed with noise, parents talking, students running, teachers organizing the next act. Yet everywhere he walked, people glanced at him with new eyes. Not the eyes that saw a janitor, not the eyes that pitied a struggling father, but the eyes that recognized something rare, true talent, true heart, true courage. Ethan was still dizzy from the experience. His hands shook slightly, not from nerves, but from emotion that refused to settle. Lily squeezed his fingers every few steps as if reminding him, "I'm here, Daddy. You're not alone." Her tiny presence grounded him in a way nothing else could. As they headed to the back of the auditorium, so Ethan could put away his cleaning cart, a well-dressed woman approached them. She carried a leather folder and wore glasses that made her look sharp and serious. "Excuse me," she said politely. "You're the one who played the piano?" Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to say yes, but Lily answered proudly, "That's my daddy." The woman smiled. "Well, your daddy is truly gifted." She introduced herself as a music teacher from a respected community art center. "I've heard thousands of performances," she said. "But what you played tonight wasn't just skill. It was soul." Ethan felt his face warm with embarrassment. "I haven't played in years," he murmured. "I just tried." She nodded. "And that trying was more powerful than perfection. Have you ever considered performing again? Or teaching?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "I never thought I could. Life got in the way," but the woman didn't back down. "Life got in the way," she repeated softly, "but you played your way through it. That takes strength." Before leaving, she handed him her card. "If you ever want to return to music, even a little, call me." Ethan stared at the card as if it were a door someone had suddenly unlocked. Soon after, the principal approached, still brimming with excitement. "Ethan, we would love to host a community music night next month," he said. "We want you to be the featured performer. Maybe even share your story with the students." Ethan blinked, overwhelmed. "Me? Not just anything," the principal interrupted gently. "Not anymore." Everywhere he turned, someone thanked him, praised him, encouraged him. But all Ethan could focus on was Lily's proud smile. She looked at him the way children look at superheroes, with complete belief. When the show ended and the families went home, Ethan stayed behind to clean the auditorium. It was his job, and he had always taken pride in doing it well. But tonight, something felt different. The broom in his hand didn't feel like a symbol of limitation anymore. The piano on the stage didn't feel like an unreachable dream. Both were simply parts of his life, one for earning, one for living. As he wiped down the last row of seats, Lily sat on the stage swinging her legs, humming the melody he played earlier. He looked at her and felt his heart swell. "Did you like the show?" he asked. She nodded excitedly. "The show was good," she said. But you were the best part. Her small honesty hit him harder than any applause. He walked toward the stage and sat beside her. The auditorium was quiet now, filled with soft leftover echoes of the evening. Lily leaned against him and whispered, "Daddy, will you play again someday?" Ethan looked at the piano, then at his daughter, and something inside him settled into place, like a puzzle piece returning home after years of being lost. "Yes," he said softly. "I think I will," Lily beamed, throwing her arms around his waist. "I knew it," she whispered, later that night. They walked home under the streetlights, Lily holding his hand tightly. The wind was cool, the world quiet. Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. Not because everything had changed, they still had bills, responsibilities, early mornings, but because something inside him had awakened. A piece of himself he thought he had buried had finally risen, cleaned, and stepped into the light again. He wasn't just a janitor anymore. He wasn't just a man surviving each day. He wasn't just a father doing his best. He was all of those things, but now something more. He was a musician again, a man with a dream restored, a father who showed his daughter what bravery looks like, a human being who stepped back into his truth. Note by trembling note, and as they reached their small apartment, Lily looked up at him with sleepy,